Tonight, the families who lost everything days before Christmas. We report from the flood zone in far north Queensland and Parkerville in Perth, where homes have burned to the ground, residents reeling from the loss. Our reporters are standing by on the ground in both emergency zones in the east and the west. Also tonight, a nation in mourning, many dead after a mass shooting at a university in Prague. A UN-backed body warns that the people of Gaza are facing the worst case of food insecurity the world has ever seen. And Test cricketer Usman Khawaja reveals why he wore a black armband as he faces sanction by the ICC. I'm Anton. This is SBS World News. Good evening. We begin tonight with the disasters on both sides of the country that have impacted many families just days before Christmas. In Western Australia, the fire emergency is far from over after a fast-moving fire destroyed 3 homes on the outskirts of Perth. One family returning home to find it reduced to ashes. First, let's go to far north Queensland, where the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has been inspecting the damage in Cairns after the extensive flooding caused by ex-tropical cyclone Jasper.
It's taken days of tireless work to clear out flood-ravaged homes. The Prime Minister in Cairns to witness the damage himself and hear directly from those impacted.
You're safe.
Residents sharing with him the rapid pace their lives were upended.
I remember looking out the backyard that morning and it was over my fence.
You couldn't think clearly. It was just panic stations.
SES volunteers on the front line of the flood recovery also recounted their efforts of going home to help residents.
Holloway's Beach was the worst hit area in the Cairns.
Earlier, breakfast was served to refuel response crews, working to restore power that had been cut to thousands of homes. A popular gesture of thanks in the Sunshine State extended for their hard work.
To get 99%.
Behind closed doors, the Prime Minister also in talks with tourism operators. Their message, Cairns is back open.
We need to make sure that as the floodwaters recede, the visits to this beautiful part of Australia don't recede with them.
To help the recovery effort, more federal money has been promised. $25 million in extra grants for primary producers. The same for small businesses and support services. $9 million for council areas hit and another $5 million to encourage tourists back.
We will continue to look to what the region needs.
Cairns go-kart hire among those hardest hit. Floodwaters swept through their business, bringing with it 4 inches of mud. Like so many, their long road to recovery from this disaster is just beginning.
I mean, we've lost everything and, we're a small business, so if we can't operate, we can't make money.
Even as more support is offered, it's clear the scale of damage here means recovery will take time. The Prime Minister has described the resilience of residents as extraordinary, but they will also need patience.
We know there are challenges ahead, but I'm very confident that we can overcome them.
And reporter Tom Stainer joins us now live. Tom, good evening to you. As the Prime Minister was saying, the floodwaters are receding, but despite that, many families still face an uncertain future.
Anton, as authorities continue to survey the damage from this disaster, sadly, the reported number of families impacted keeps rising. We've now got 13 homes destroyed and more than 1,000 properties impacted, ranging from severe to more moderate. They expect they'll have a firmer figure on this by the end of the week. Right now, the focus has been on that immediate clean-up task, but as attention turns to the longer-term build-back, the effective rollout of those government support programs is going to be crucial. Of course, the challenge is also going to be different for people depending on whether they have insurance coverage or not, even as all this continues. The focus right now placed on getting tourists back into the region at a crucial time of year. Anton?
That live report from Tom Stainer in far north Queensland. Now to Western Australia, where several communities are assessing the damage after fires ripped through parts of the state this week. Fires at Launceston, Toodyay, north of Perth, and Eaton and Manjimup in the south were downgraded earlier today. This afternoon, authorities escalated the alert at a fire at Keysbrook. They've also confirmed 3 homes were destroyed yesterday in the semi-rural area of Parkerville in Perth's Hills. The community there reeling from the loss.
A burned pile of rubble, all that's left of this family's home, where just 2 days ago Christmas presents sat beneath a decorated tree.
Today would have been my last day at work, and we'd be getting ready to have our big Christmas family dinner, which we were all hosting here, with all the presents that have now gone up in smoke. So we would have been getting ready to get everything sorted for a big pool party, and it's no longer going to happen.
The bushfires starting and spreading rapidly early yesterday morning.
My emergency app kept pinging while I was at work, so I checked it and decided to look at my cameras, and my cameras at my house were showing my dogs running around with their tails tucked and smoke everywhere. Then I looked at the camera near the pool, which then showed that all the bush area around the pool was on fire.
Miss Moody among residents in the area who narrowly avoided being hit by fires in 2014 that destroyed 57 homes and killed 1 person.
The fire started in the same streets, almost the same spot I think, but that day we had no easterly, so it actually went the other direction, just as devastating for all the other people.
Residents in the semi-rural area losing more than property, farm animals, produce and beloved pets.
I mean, they're pets. You do what you can for them, right? But it's heartbreaking. A lot of people lost a lot more than us, I could keep saying, but they were my babies.
Some of the residents here had cameras on their property to watch it all unfold, while others could only hold on to hope. The cause of this blaze is an eerie repeat of 2014 following fallen power lines that sparked the devastation. This time, families were not so lucky following strong easterly winds up this hill, fueled by hot weather.
Really intense fire behaviour yesterday. I think that's the key point in this, is driven by the temperature and particularly the wind.
Teams still assessing the full extent of damage to homes, sheds and other property.
Of course, this time of year with Christmas, it's going to be felt really hard by those people, and we feel for them.
A reprieve for firefighters today, able to bring several fires under control with more favourable conditions. The Premier thanking them for their efforts in difficult times.
Terrain, the strong winds, the high temperatures. And this is an outstanding result in terms of limiting the damage and getting this fire under control.
Authorities closely monitoring fires still burning at several other locations.
And reporter Christopher Tan joins us now from Parkerville. Chris, good evening to you. Those communities have already been through a lot, but are more tough conditions expected as we head into the weekend?
Anton, while the fires that have been at emergency level over the past 2 days have been mostly contained, those fire emergency levels has escalated again on the outskirts of Perth in Keysbrook and Bellup. Authorities reminding residents to have a bushfire evacuation plan in place as temperatures and wind conditions are expected to pick up again on the weekend, meaning the fight is not over yet. It's been a difficult week for WA residents all across the state, including this homeowner here in the Perth Hills, who have obviously nothing left to go through this festive season. But they say it's been the rallying of the community that have led them to believe that they can rebuild again and want to rebuild again.
Thanks. That's reporter Christopher Tan updating us live on that bushfire emergency in WA. Police are investigating the motive behind a deadly shooting in the Czech Republic. The shooter, who died at the scene, is not believed to be linked to international terrorism. The Czech Prime Minister expressed his condolences and said there was no justification for the senseless attack. At least 14 people have been killed and 25 wounded after a gunman opened fire in a Prague university.
Perching on a ledge to hide from the shooter. These students eventually decided to jump, a leap that may have saved their lives. The gunman was not only targeting those inside the university, sparking panic on the streets below. It's peak tourist season in Prague. The city is one of Europe's most popular destinations at Christmas.
I went through the crowd, not realizing what actually is really going on, because as probably a lot of people, I wasn't just ready to admit that something like that could happen in Prague.
The guys from the special forces told me that the attack it's happening in the faculty, which was for me even more stressful because my daughter was over there. And I was giving their instruction like not to be next to the window, lay down, barricade the door.
Police found the shooter's body. It's not clear if he was killed by officers or took his own life. He was later named by local media as David Kozak, a 24-year-old philosophy student with no criminal history.
Já v tuto chvíli nevím, jaký motiv se rýsuje, ale mluvím tady o inspiraci jednoho člověka doposud z informací, které máme, tak premiantního studenta hrůzným činem jinde na světě.
Kozak lived in Hostun, a village about 20 kilometres west of Prague. His father's body was found there earlier in the day. Police received a tip the student was travelling to the capital with the intention of taking his own life. He was supposed to attend a lecture in the afternoon, so officers evacuated the building where it was meant to take place, but then received a call about a shooting in a different part of the campus and scrambled to respond. Police also suspect Kozak was responsible for the murder of a man and his 2-month-old daughter last week. They were found shot dead in a forest outside Prague. Authorities think he chose his victims at random. His social media suggests he was inspired by a recent Russian school shooting.
To je žádná indicie, že by tento čin měl jakoukoliv spojitost s mezinárodním terorismem.
Gun crime in the Czech Republic is relatively rare, and Kozak had a valid gun licence. He was found with what was described as a large arsenal of weapons.
Pro tento hrůzný čin neexistuje žádné ospravedlnění. Stejně jako řada z vás cítím hluboký smutek a znechucení tváří v tvář tomuto nesmyslnému a brutálnímu násilí.
A national day of mourning has been declared after the worst mass shooting since the country gained independence 30 years ago. Ben Lewis, SBS World News.
The UN Security Council has delayed voting on a resolution on the war in Gaza for a 4th straight day, with its members still disagreeing over wording. A vote is possible tomorrow. As the debate dragged on, a UN-backed body gave one of its most urgent humanitarian warnings yet, saying Gaza is now facing levels of food insecurity the world has never seen.
For Gaza's displaced, this is the daily reality of finding food. Children hold out their buckets, jostling for just a cup of soup. The UN says Gaza is now seeing what it calls a catastrophic level of starvation. Its hunger monitoring system finding the Strip has the highest proportion of people facing acute food insecurity ever recorded anywhere in the world.
I've seen Afghanistan, I've seen Yemen, I've seen Syria, I've seen South Sudan, I've seen northeast Nigeria, pretty much everywhere. I've never seen something at this scale as is happening in Gaza and at this speed.
The number of casualties is growing with every strike, but there's few hospitals remaining capable of treating them. The World Health Organization says only 9 of Gaza's 36 health facilities are still partially functional, and none of them are in the Strip's north.
I'm standing in the surgical building of Al-Shifa Hospital, where 2 days ago, this hospital was hit by artillery shells, and you can see the gaping hole in the wall behind me and the absolute destruction from this attack on Gaza's largest hospital and most important healthcare facility.
Hamas says 70% of the 20,000 deaths it's reported so far have been women and children. Israel is giving a different toll, saying it's now killed 8,000 members of Hamas. Neither figure can be independently verified.
כוחותינו ממשיכים להעמיק את הפעילות הקרקעית בצפון עזה ובדרומה. מאז סיום ההפוגה בפעולה הקרקעית בעזה, כוחותינו חיסלו יותר מ-2,000 מחבלים מהאוויר, מהים ומהיבשה.
The UN Human Rights Office raising concerns over what it called possible war crimes, saying it's received disturbing information alleging that Israeli defence forces summarily killed at least 11 unarmed Palestinian men in front of their family members. The Israeli authorities must immediately institute an independent, thorough and effective investigation into these allegations. Speaking to the French press agency AFP on the condition of anonymity, an Israeli official dismissed the allegations as nothing but blood libel. Claudia Farhat, SBS World News.
Coming up.
I don't regret a damn thing.
Donald Trump's former lawyer files for bankruptcy. What caused Rudy Giuliani's debts to soar? Indian Parliament chaos, why dozens of opposition MPs are now suspended. We have the latest from New Delhi. And the protein-laden pests plated up. How eating insects could help with global food insecurity. Ukraine's defence minister says the army wants to recruit Ukrainians living abroad and might sanction those who do not report for military service. Earlier this week, President Volodymyr Zelensky said Ukraine plans to recruit up to 500,000 new soldiers, but acknowledged it was a sensitive issue.
President Zelensky denies it, but the outlook for Ukraine is looking bleak. Western support is weakening. There's a shortage of ammunition. And now a recruitment crisis, even as the death toll continues to rise. He said this week the army needs up to 500,000 more soldiers. And according to the Defence Minister Rustem Umerov, Ukrainian men living overseas will now be invited to report to recruitment centres. He said the government is still discussing what will happen if they don't come voluntarily. A military spokesman later said the minister was speaking in general terms only about the importance of joining the army, but added, just because you haven't received call-up papers doesn't mean the threat to Ukraine has disappeared. Does that apply to Ukrainians abroad? Absolutely. On the streets of Kyiv, some say a bigger army is not the answer.
Всплывает мотивация у людей, и поэтому люди сейчас мне кажется, людей, которых будут принудительно пытаться заставлять щось робити, це вже не та війська буде. Ну, це моя точка зору.
Others point the finger elsewhere.
Наша проблема не только в нехватке людей, наша проблема основная в нехватке оружия. Если бы нам выделили все, что обещали, то и результаты были бы абсолютно другими.
The front lines have barely moved, despite a counter-offensive that began in June. Russia's defence minister said Ukrainian forces had been held back by minefields.
Вооруженные силы Украины ценой колоссальных потерь смогли незначительно продвинуться на запорожском направлении, не сумев преодолеть даже тактическую зону обороны наших войск.
Earlier today, Kyiv came under attack for the 6th time this month. A drone hitting a block of flats, injuring 2 people. The city's residents seizing what moments they can as a third year of war looms. Nick Wells, SBS World News.
Donald Trump's former attorney, Rudy Giuliani, has filed for bankruptcy just a day after a judge ordered him to immediately start paying the $218 million he owes 2 Georgia election workers for defaming them. Mr. Giuliani is also a defendant in the Georgia election interference case, as is Donald Trump. The former president remains the Republican frontrunner to the growing frustration of his rivals.
Great to be here in Anamosa.
Less than a month before Republicans in Iowa become the first in the nation to cast their votes in support of a presidential candidate, Donald Trump's rivals scrambling to catch him.
Everybody knows 4 more years of chaos, we won't survive it.
Nikki Haley rising in the polls to second place in the Republican race, but still 50 points behind Trump.
I don't like the discourse that we have. I don't like the chaos and the insanity we feel like we're in.
But others unbothered. After Trump said this of migrants last weekend,
They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done. They poison.
42% of likely Iowa Republican caucus goers said that remark makes them more likely to support him. Trump's challenges mounting on the legal front.
Ms. Carroll, can we have a statement, please?
Writer E. Jean Carroll's second defamation suit against Trump begins January 16. She was already awarded $7 million by a jury in May, which found Trump liable for sexually abusing her in the 1990s and defaming her in 2022. Trump now requesting a 90-day delay of trial proceedings. His lawyers indicating he may ask the Supreme Court to rule on whether he can use presidential immunity. If so, that would be the third Trump matter heading to the top court. The most immediate being a challenge to Colorado's ruling this week that he's ineligible to be on the 2024 Republican ballot.
I think Colorado's wrong. I think the Supreme Court's going to shoot it down, and I think they need to shoot it down quick before anybody else thinks they want to do that.
All this as one former Trump lawyer is in dire financial straits.
I don't regret a damn thing.
Rudy Giuliani filing for bankruptcy, acknowledging he owes his lawyers more than $6 million. That's before his defence costs in the upcoming Georgia election interference case, in which his former client, Donald Trump, is a co-defendant. Pruluan, SBS World News.
British and French border officials say their migrant crackdown operations this year have been successful after halving the number of migrant boat arrivals. More than a third of small boats that have attempted to cross the English Channel from Calais were intercepted, yet thousands are still embarking on the dangerous journey.
A cold, clear night on a beach south of Calais. French police on patrol. A beefed-up force looking to block small boats with migrants from setting off across the channel.
So here's the inflatable. We're told it's just been abandoned. In fact, you can see here where the police have already slashed it to make sure that the migrants can't use it again. We're told about 50 people were trying to get into the water just a few yards away. And these are the inner tubes that they were going to use instead of life jackets. Extraordinary to think 50 people cramming inside this flimsy thing to try and get across to England.
Nearby, just before dawn, we find two families who failed to cross tonight, huddled at a bus stop.
The boat was broken and I don't going. The water was up.
The waves get bigger.
Yeah.
So you had to come back?
Yeah.
17-year-old Faiza from Iraq asked us to hide her identity.
I have no place to going.
You're very sad.
Yeah, very sad. We have no chance.
What will happen to you?
I have no idea. Just to think and show how my life is bad to bad to bad.
So you've got one of the waiting areas over behind?
Daytime, up the coast in Calais, French police talk tactics with their British counterparts, a sign of growing cooperation. Britain is now providing France almost £500 million for equipment like drones and to double the manpower to tackle the smugglers. So is it making a difference? The results speak for themselves, says Mathilde Potel from the French Border Police. This year, the number of crossings has dropped by 35%.
We have seen significant improvements in prevention of small boat launches. We've seen a reduction in the number of arriving individuals this year in this way, and overall we are continuing to see the fruits of our labour and of our investment as these additional resources come on board throughout the next year.
It is a big drop, and yet in a muddy clearing near Calais, the crowds keep coming. From Afghanistan, from Sudan, ready to risk death in the Channel and ignoring warnings that Britain may send them to Rwanda.
It worries you, but it's not stopping you.
Not stopping us. Still trying to go to UK, but hope they don't send us to Rwanda. Yeah.
Suddenly, a rush to leave as the smugglers usher one group away for another attempted crossing tonight. if they can sneak past the extra French police here and cross a dangerous stretch of water, England awaits, tantalisingly close.
Andrew Harding with that report. Fiji's President Ratu Williame Katonivera has granted pardons to 3 high-profile prisoners convicted for their part in the 2000 military coup. Ratu Inoke Takive Kata was convicted in 2011 for inciting mutiny, while Timothy Silatolu and Josefa Nata were convicted of treason. They were among 12 convicts who were pardoned on the recommendation of the Mercy Commission. The leader of the coup, George Speight, is still in jail serving a life sentence for treason. India's parliament has approved key legislation despite more than 100 opposition MPs absent from the debate. The passage of the 3 criminal bills has been described by Prime Minister Narendra Modi as a watershed moment, marking the end of what were colonial-era laws. It's the latest in a week of turmoil in Indian politics.
This is the moment India's parliament descended into chaos. 2 protesters seen breaching security, making their way onto the floor of the lower house, setting off smoke bombs and shouting anti-government slogans. Extra security measures put into place after the incident, which coincided with the anniversary of a deadly 2001 attack on the old parliament. This yellow pigment from the smoke proving to be harmless, but the political impact reverberating. Members of the opposition demanded a statement from India's Interior Minister on the massive security breach. Instead, 143 MPs were suspended for causing disruption.
I think it's a betrayal of parliamentary democracy. It's a betrayal of what Parliament is all about. It's a betrayal of the basic standards, principles and conventions by which this House should be functioning.
India's ruling party, the BJP, went on to pass key legislation despite the opposition's absence.
Do they want an opposition-less parliament? Is this what they're working towards? Do they want parliament just to be a rubber stamp for their diktats? Why can't they respect parliament, come and make a categorical statement?
The BJP dismissing their calls.
और ये जो ब्लॉक कर रहे हैं, जो अवरोध पैदा कर रहे हैं, ये उनकी हताशा है 3 प्रदेशों में हार के कारण.
The Parliament's remaining sittings for 2023 end this week, with the suspended politicians still unable to attend. Sophie Bennett, SBS World News.
Correspondent Nia Punia joins us now from New Delhi. Nia, good evening to you. Quite a week of turmoil in the Lok Sabha as we're reporting there. How significant would you say is the suspension of these opposition MPs, now numbering, we understand, 146? Is it a betrayal of democracy as they claim?
Anton, that's right. Some would argue that India's parliamentary proceedings are no stranger to chaos and disruptions, but we've never seen unprecedented scenes like the ones that played out this week and the last. It started with that security breach and ended with that mass suspension of 146 parliamentarians, all of them from opposition parties, for what the government called was, quote-unquote, unruly behaviour. This is the largest mass suspension India's parliament has seen in its entire history, and opposition leaders are now taking this fight to the streets of India. They're holding mass demonstrations on Friday across the country, accusing the government of having no faith in the systems of a democracy and accusing them of running an autocratic regime. It's a charge the government has denied. It accused the opposition of deliberately trying to derail proceedings in the House and trying to politicize a serious security breach. But critics of the government agree that this is a majority government trying to show its critics and opponents the sort of power it can wield ahead of elections next year.
And meanwhile, we've seen the passing of these new criminal bills, which the Prime Minister Narendra Modi has called a watershed moment. Why are these bills so important?
Well, for the last few years, Mr. Modi has been on a campaign to try and de-link India from its colonial legacy, and this is a step in that direction. Mr. Modi said that these bills are justice and service-oriented instead of looking at delivering punishment, referring to the British-era criminal code that India had prior to this, saying that's how the British had envisaged implementing laws here in the country. But as far as these laws are concerned, significant criticism being levelled. For example, they make a provision for police custody being allowed for up to 90 days. Most critics say that this would be something that would disproportionately impact minority communities because there's no safeguards in place to keep police excesses in check. They've done away with the provision of a sedition law, but they've introduced instead an offence if you insult or commit an offence against the nation. Now, critics say that's too broad a term and could be misused by state agencies.
Thank you. That is the latest from New Delhi. Correspondent Nia Puni updating us live. The southern Indian state of Tamil Nadu is bracing for more rain amid days of heavy floods in the wake of Cyclone Michaung, which battered the area earlier this month. At least 10 people are reported to have died, with the flooding disrupting traffic and destroying properties, with hundreds still stranded.
Entire neighbourhoods underwater. State officials say this is the most rain seen in 6 decades. Over 60,000 hectares of farmlands, including crops, have been destroyed in several districts across the state. But for many remaining in what's left of their homes, dealing with the aftermath. With roads inundated and rescues by boat, officials say more than 12,500 people have been evacuated to relief camps. On the ground, volunteers provide relief. And in the sky, the Air Force dropping aid to hundreds still stranded. 48 tons so far, distributed in dozens of areas. Others in isolated areas airlifted to safety. Yusuf Saudi, SBS World News.
The defamation case brought by former Liberal staffer Bruce Lehrmann is suing over an interview with former staffer Brittany Higgins aired in 2021, in which she alleged she was raped by a colleague. He has always denied any sexual activity took place. In delivering closing arguments, Lehrmann's barrister Steve Wybrow questioned Ms Higgins' credibility. Justice Michael Lee is expected to deliver a judgment early next year. One of Australia's biggest healthcare providers has had sensitive data stolen in a cyber hack. St Vincent's Health Australia says it began responding to the attack on Tuesday and is working to determine what data has been removed. External security experts have been called in and federal and state agencies notified.
And the investigation into this matter continues. Key activities include securing and containing the incident, understanding what the cyber criminals have done and identifying what data may have been accessed and stolen.
St Vincent's Health Australia operates inner-city public hospitals in Sydney and Melbourne, as well as 10 private hospitals in Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland. Global markets continue to be buoyed by the prospect of lower US interest rates. SBS finance editor Ricardo Gonçalves joins us now with more. And Ricardo, investors no doubt looking ahead to the new year.
Anton, investors here may have left early for the Christmas holidays because the market finished flat and will now remain closed until Wednesday. But most of the action happened overseas anyway, especially in the US, where shares on Wall Street continue to rally. The S&P 500 gaining another 1% to be within reach of a record high and is now up an incredible 24% for the year. Now, that's good news for local superannuation funds with exposure to international shares. The turning point was about November, where investors started to price in interest rate cuts from the US Federal Reserve next year. And while that provides some optimism, there's a cause for caution.
two big wild cards that I see are, it's an election year. So market hates uncertainty and unpredictability. And if we have an administration change, obviously all the policies will change, all the regulations will change. The other big wild card, and that's the war on different fronts. We have a war in the Middle East. There's a war in Europe with Russia, Ukraine, and in Southeast Asia with the potential China versus Taiwan. That could overnight become a black swan event.
So, by the close, the Australian share market barely moved. The All Ords a couple of points higher, the 200 down a couple of points. Real estate stocks did best. Shipbuilder Austal jumped on a US Navy contract win. Core Lithium tumbled 21%. It is reviewing its business strategy amid falling lithium prices. A standout today was Fortescue Metals, which hit another record as the iron ore price continues to climb.
The iron ore story is fascinating because it seems to fly in the face of everything that we believe at the moment and every other signal that we're seeing in terms of industrial demand from China, steel production, which is obviously so sensitive to the property market, which still, from all intents and purposes, and what we can tell from the very opaque world that is China's financial system and property sector, still not particularly robust. So for whatever reason, iron ore is appreciating. It's really supporting our market going into next year too. It's going to support the government's bottom line.
And earlier in the day, the Australian dollar reached a fresh 5-month high to be above 68 US cents. It's below that at the moment and is stronger against the British sterling as data this evening show the UK economy contracted 0.1% in the third quarter, suggesting it may currently be in recession. Australian-listed taxi service provider A2B, which operates 13 cabs and Silver Service, is being bought out by its major Singaporean shareholder. Comfort Dell Group will pay $182 million to secure the deal and currently owns just over 9% of the company, which is trying to win back market share from Uber and other ride-sharing services. A2B shares surged 17% on the news. And with just 2 days left to get your Christmas shopping done, gift cards seem to be a quick and popular option, with a Rate City survey of over 1,000 people finding almost 1 in 4 adults bought a card as a Christmas present last year. But it pays to check the fine print. Some charge activation fees for the buyer, others can't be used online, and make sure the expiry date is recorded prominently.
The government introduced tough rules around gift cards in 2019. It really helped clean up the gift card market. This includes a mandatory minimum 3-year expiry on every single gift card across the country. There's only a few exceptions there.
And if you do receive one, remember to use it and treat it like cash, because if you lose it, Anton, it generally can't be replaced.
Thank you, Ricardo. Well, could bugs be the answer to the issue of food insecurity? Some scientists and environmentalists think so. In some parts of the world, fried grasshoppers are a delicacy that many enjoy when millions of the bugs hatch in seasonal rains. In Uganda's capital, the season of fried grasshoppers is about to begin. Not for everyone. Julius Mugambwa with that report. Coming up, we explain why Usman Khawaja is in hot water with cricket bosses and the shock court ruling that has rattled European football. Sport now, and Usman Khawaja is urging cricket bosses to show more consistency after being charged by the International Cricket Council. Australia's star batter could receive an official reprimand for wearing a black armband in the first test against Pakistan last week. The issue has overshadowed a campaign launch close to Khawaja's heart.
A cracking pull shot from a promising young cricketer. It's a scene of inclusion Usman Khawaja wants to see expanded around the country.
Unless you were a past player, unless you've been in the system before, it's so hard to crack this system. It's self-perpetuating. And the issue is that for a long time, Cricket Australia has been a very white-dominated sport.
Cricket Australia has now launched its multicultural action plan aimed at fostering inclusion.
Cricket is our national game, and it must be a game for absolutely everyone.
But we're under no illusions that we've got a huge amount of work to do
to make sure that Australian cricket genuinely represents the community we serve.
But at a game to promote multicultural inclusion, the focus was instead on Khawaja's disagreement with cricket bosses.
And he loves batting against the country of his birth. His numbers are extraordinary.
Just days after victory over Pakistan, in which Khawaja starred with the bat, cricket's world body has charged the Australian for wearing a black armband. Earlier, he wore shoes with messages reading, "All lives are equal and freedom is a human right." He says he wore the armband for a different reason.
The ICC asked me on day 2 what it was for. I told it was for a personal bereavement. I never ever stated it was for anything else. The shoes were a different matter. I'm happy to say that. But the armband made no sense to me.
Usman Khawaja will join the rest of the Australian cricket team in taking to the field here for the Boxing Day test in a matter of days. But the prospect of him wearing the black armband again for this match has already been ruled out.
I think from my point of view, that's all I ask for the ICC, just consistency. I think there's been plenty of people who've not had permission to wear stuff in the past.
The star cricketer also received support from the Prime Minister.
The position that he put forward is one that I think is pretty uncontroversial.
The complex issue so far unresolved ahead of the Boxing Day test. Taisok Yuzi, SBS World News.
India's cricketers are building a first innings lead in their women's test against Australia. On day 2, they passed the Aussies' total of 219 with 7 wickets still in hand. Before lunch, the home team made 95 runs during the morning session in Mumbai. Smriti Mandhana hitting the highest individual score so far, making 74 runs from 106 balls, including 12 fours. But she was run out after some sharp fielding from Kim Garth and Ashley Gardner. Matthew Leckie and Jamie McLaren are the 2 biggest names missing from the Socceroos squad for next month's Asia Cup in Qatar. 36-year-old Uruguayan-born forward Bruno Fornaroli has been picked instead. Coach Graham Arnold admitting his 12 goals in 8 games for Melbourne victory this season just too good to ignore. The 26-man squad includes captain and goalkeeper Matty Ryan, who is expected to recover from a fractured cheekbone. And Arnold is confident ahead of a return to the country where the Socceroos reached the World Cup round of 16 a year ago.
I truly believe that I've selected a fantastic squad, a strong squad, a great mixture of experienced players, but also inexperienced players that will bring a lot of energy into the camp. And you know, as I said, it's in my view, it's a very, very strong squad, and I'm looking forward to going across to Doha with this squad and doing a fantastic job for the nation.
The threat of a breakaway European Super League is looming over football once again. Plans have been revived after a shock ruling from the European Court of Justice. It judged that banning clubs from joining a rival competition was unlawful, and governing bodies UEFA and FIFA are, quote, abusing a dominant position.
They thought it was all over. It isn't now. 2 years ago, a proposed European Super League prompted fury from the fans, and it soon collapsed. But UEFA and FIFA's threats to ban clubs joining a breakaway was today ruled to be illegal. And within hours, a new European Super League was being touted.
This proposed format will guarantee openness,
involving 64 men's teams and 32 women's teams.
It is one competition for all clubs, all players and all fans.
Those behind the revamp said the ruling was a landmark moment.
And it paves the way for the creation of a new, more exciting competition at European level in which clubs can determine their own future. The strongest message today goes out to the fans. Football is free.
UEFA, though, which runs the Champions League, won by Manchester City last season, said they'd withstand any rival tournament.
Football is not for sale. We can show that many times. We did all together, all the football stakeholders and all the European society, and nothing, absolutely nothing can change that.
And how tempting would a revamped Super League be? Well, Manchester United were one of the 6 English clubs that signed up to the original Super League. But in a statement today, they insisted they remain fully committed to UEFA competitions, while the government say their new football regulator will stop clubs from joining breakaway tournaments.
If the clubs were silly enough to try to do that again, then it would have the same reaction from fans and the same result. It should be won on the football field, not by stitch-up deals in the boardrooms.
But an idea which seemed finished is now back. If fans thought they'd seen off the Super League, they may have to think again.
Andy Swiss reporting. Coming up, the weather and Christmas queues in a race to get rich. Why these long lines appear at Spanish kiosks every December. To the weather forecast now. Troughs and onshore winds are bringing showers and storms to the Northern Territory, Queensland and eastern Victoria. High pressure will keep dry conditions in southern WA, Tasmania, western Victoria and South Australia. In the major centres, partly cloudy in Sydney, showers and a possible storm in Canberra, sunny in Melbourne, partly cloudy in Hobart and Adelaide, sunny also in Perth, a possible storm in Darwin and a shower or two in Brisbane. Looking further afield, showers in Port Vila and Nandi, partly cloudy in Noumea, a few showers in Auckland and also in Wellington. In Southeast Asia, wind in Bangkok, clouds over Phnom Penh, thunder in Kuala Lumpur, drizzle in Jakarta and showers in Honiara. Further north, fine in Seoul and Tokyo, drizzle in Taipei, partly cloudy in Hong Kong, a few showers in Manila. Heading west now, showers in Beirut and Tehran, fine conditions in Baghdad, partly cloudy in Islamabad, fine also in Mumbai. On to Europe, snow in Stockholm and Moscow, cloudy in London, fine in Paris, fog in Rome, a few showers in Istanbul. In Africa, fine in Algiers, partly cloudy in Casablanca and Cairo, showers in Johannesburg. In South America, rain in Caracas, a few showers in Panama City, rain also in La Paz, partly cloudy in Santiago, clouds over Buenos Aires. And for North America, fine in Vancouver, showers in Toronto, clouds over New York, showers in Los Angeles, partly cloudy in Miami, fine though in Mexico City. Well, large queues have formed outside kiosks and shops in Spain ahead of the nationally televised draw for the Christmas lottery known as El Gordo. The popular state-run lottery will dish out a total of 2.59 billion euros, much of it in hundreds of smaller prizes. Ticket sales begin months ahead, this year as early as July. The first draw took place in December 1812. Recapping our top story now, the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has expressed his shock at the scale of the unprecedented flood damage in far north Queensland. But he's also urging Australians not to cancel their holiday bookings and to show support for the region. That is The World this Friday. If you've missed some of tonight's bulletin, you can catch up on SBS On Demand. And for the latest stories, head to the SBS News website. I'll be back with the late news at 10:15. Good night.